The citizens of Idaho deserve better. That's how one member of the House Ethics Committee described the conduct of Representative Priscilla Giddings. And to back up that statement, that committee unanimously recommended that Giddings be formally censured and removed from one of her committee assignments. Several members called her actions not only unbecoming, but detrimental to members of the Idaho's House of Representatives. Those accusations stem from another ethics hearing from earlier this year when a now former lawmaker faced an ethics hearing after claims that he raped a State House staffer. Now, leading up to that first ethics hearing, Giddings shared a link on her social media pages and newsletter that included the name and picture of the alleged rape victim, Jane Doe. This hearing went 2 days, and a lot was said during these 2 days, or day and a half or so, which is why Joe Paris is here to walk us through it right now. Let's start at the beginning, Joe, because, well, like maybe where Representative Giddings came in and kind of set the tone with how she addressed the members of the committee.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are interested to see how Representative Giddings went through this process, to see how she's going to defend herself, to see if there was going to be a change kind of in the script, so to say, in terms of what she was going to say. And I know a lot of people were excited to see what she would do in questioning Brian. And we found out pretty quickly that the most substantive stuff that we heard from Representative Giddings in terms of defending herself and explaining her actions were in her opening statement. And we'll explain a little bit more about why that was in a minute. But first, let's take a look at her opening statement.
I will represent myself to the best of my ability, always sticking to the truth. And I call upon this committee to also stick to the truth. I deny all of the allegations made against me in their entirety. These accusations are unfounded, biased attacks driven by partisan political goals. And I call upon this committee to immediately stop this unwarranted waste of taxpayer funds by dismissing these complaints in their entirety. These allegations are nothing more than crass attempts by my political opponents to take advantage of the woke cancel culture movement that wants to destroy Idahoans' individual rights for their own personal gain. I believe that based on this committee's previous ethical inquest this year, that there's nothing that I can say or do that will affect the outcome of what I believe is a predetermined verdict. Therefore, I refuse to give this hearing unlimited time and resources.
It was then that she got up following those statements and just walked out, saying she didn't want to waste any of the taxpayer money in doing so. And she said she was just going to be prolonging the inevitable anyway. So we heard from some of these lawmakers, though, that signed on to these complaints.
Yeah, more than 24 lawmakers actually signed on to a pair of complaints about the conduct of Representative Giddings. And there was questions about would there be different takes from the lawmakers in terms of how they saw the situation. And Brian, it really quickly turned into a theme among these lawmakers that testified who had signed on to this complaint against Representative Giddings. We're going to show you a highlight here of some of the points that were made by a few of the lawmakers. But as you watch this, I want you to think that all the lawmakers we heard of that signed on to the complaint essentially said the same thing.
Does she have a right to post on her Facebook whatever she wants? I would say yes. But then do you have to accept the consequences that come with that? And to that I would say yes.
If we all did that, if we all shared everything we saw on the internet and even implied that it was, quote, news, I think, to be frank, that would make us all look like idiots. And I think that has the effect of reducing the perceived integrity of this body.
I believe that her answers to the questions on the post or the link were very evasive and attempting to not actually admit what was going on. So I believe there was a level of integrity there that I was not real comfortable with. It probably wasn't the whole truth, but we all know half-truths are more dangerous than whole truths.
Okay, so that wasn't the last we heard of Representative Giddings after she walked out from opening statement. She came back for the afternoon session, and she took the stand to answer some questions that the committee members had for her. And it kind of seemed like an uphill battle, possibly. I think the term belligerent or uncooperative might be used to describe how she was responding to some of these questions. Right,
and from the perspective of Representative Giddings, she believed that there was no reason to be doing this, and she's publicly commented that she doesn't think that the committee was there for the right reason. So it was a very clear battle between the committee as well as lawmakers between Giddings. and she made it very clear that this wasn't going to be an easy process. And we saw her kind of ask a lot of questions, as she has the right to, about the process and the technicalities of how things came to be. And you could tell there was some clear tension between the House Ethics Committee and Representative Giddings for a number of reasons. So if you wanted to see how Representative Giddings really responded to questions, we're going to show you that in a second. But again, keep in mind, the most substantive stuff we heard from Representative Giddings was from her opening statement that we showed you a minute ago. Essentially, what we're going to show you now is what we heard from her the rest of the afternoon.
Do you believe that Jane Doe is entitled to dignity during the Von Ellinger hearing?
Mr. Chairman, what he's talking about is irrelevant. Mr. Chairman, would you please explain to me how this is relevant to the accusation that I lied? That has nothing to do with the allegations against me here today. I just said I was under oath, and I thought that they were correct, and so I think I already answered your question.
Okay, so is that a yes? You believe them to still be accurate?
Where'd you go to law school? Mr. Chairman, if you're going to accuse me of playing games, then do I get the opportunity to accuse you of playing games?
I think you have, Representative.
Mr. Chairman, I just don't think this is relevant anymore. I mean, what you are accusing me of lying, I think the burden and proof falls on you.
That's why we're asking these questions, so you can explain.
And Brian, I just want to say that Representative Giddings was really clearly showed she's of the opinion that she answered the question. She says that I told the truth during the testimony, and I shared a link on social media that I was unaware of that included Jane Doe's picture and name. And really beyond that, she said, those are the points I have to make. You can continue to ask questions, but as you saw, those are the responses we got.
And there's a lot of references to House Rule 45. It's a long section of I guess the legislative process. A lot of questions of the process, and even Representative Crane pushed back a little bit on what Giddings was saying, calling her outright lies basically today, saying that the procedure was followed by the book. And there were a lot of references to questions that she's considered irrelevant to some of this.
Yeah, and you could hear from her comments over, an hour, almost 2 hours of her testimony yesterday afternoon, talking about what is relevant and what isn't relevant. And I think there's a soundbite that I want to play for you in terms of relevancy. This is a point that she raised that a lot of people have really talked about on social media and really at the State House after she said it. And I just wanted to play her clip right here.
I'm not sure that how I run my social media really is relevant, because then maybe we could talk about my campaign as well and how I'm running my social media for my campaign. How I run my social media really has nothing to do with my job as a state legislator.
So, okay, that's in reference specifically, Brian, to the post that she admitted she made on Facebook, again, sharing a link to a page that included Jane Doe's name and image. Representative Giddings says, again, over and over, that she shared this without fully reading the article, saying that she skimmed it and that she was unaware that, those pieces of information were in there. So then she was questioned heavily about, well, did you post this? Did you know what you were posting? So that response has been seen as facetious by some people, not my word, theirs, and they were, concerned about her response there. And I know there's been a lot of questions about where do we go from here. And I know that Representative Giddings is again of the opinion that she told the truth and that she never said she made a mistake, but she said that she did post something without fully reading it and that she had skimmed it.
Okay, so that was in reference to, well, why are we here? This is irrelevant. Well, that's the reason we are here, is because of what you posted on your social media. But they kind of ignored that. What happens now from here? They recommended she be censured and removed from one of her committee assignments. Now what?
So the whole recommendation will go to the full House. They have between now and the end of the year to come back and consider that. It will have to be a majority vote to pass censure or any types of situation like that. So Brian, we'll be keeping a close eye on this whole saga. We do know that the House does have to come back before the end of the year, not just for this, but to technically sine die. As you may remember at home, the House never adjourned for the year, so they are still waiting to come back and finish. And they also have to do that before the end of the year.
So this won't be the last that we hear of this situation or Representative Giddings. All right, thank you very much, Joe. Now, the very first person to file an ethics complaint was Representative Giddings' colleague, Representative Greg Cheney from Caldwell. He sent a letter to the House Ethics Committee, the chair, Representative Dixon, on April 19th, 3 days after Giddings posted that article that named and identified Jane Doe. Now, the complaint was dismissed today because of its criminal implications, but it didn't matter because Representative Cheney also signed on with the other one. And as he stated yesterday during his testimony and told us today, the reason he made that complaint in the first place was because he felt Giddings' post was highly inappropriate, subjected Jane Doe to undue ridicule and harassment, and would eventually have a chilling effect on people coming forward in the future. He said it's already intimidating enough for a staffer, an intern, or anyone at the State House who needs to speak up to sound an alarm against an elected official. He believes the committee did its job, and he's happy with the outcome.
Because we are expected to be held to a higher standard, and we absolutely needed to communicate that in no uncertain terms was the sort of thing that happened appropriate.
How do you feel that she handled this?
Unfortunately, I wasn't all that surprised. It showed no respect for Jane Doe, for the integrity of the House of Representatives, or for the Ethics Committee itself. You have 24 of your peers who have concerns, and you can't be bothered to so much as return an email to the Ethics Committee during the investigatory phase to set up a time that's good to meet with the Ethics Committee. That shows a great deal of contempt in my mind for, and a great deal of, I guess, hubris. Maybe that's too much of a word, but at a minimum, a lack of any sort of remorse whatsoever, and a desire to continue to pour out unfounded allegations of conspiracy and nonsense about how the Ethics Committee process works. I think it's unfortunate that we have a political environment that has kind of allowed this to grow up to the point where continually repeating misinformation is the strategy, and just digging in and being awful is the strategy. And Representative Giddings might be the most visible and most perhaps the most extreme example, but it nonetheless exists in other quarters of the majority caucus.
Social media has certainly changed the game when it comes to political discourse.
Absolutely.
What kind of message does this send from the committee?
I think it sends a message that you can't just act in whatever manner you want to. If you want to, then great, go do that as a private citizen. But that there are outer boundaries to what we will tolerate as a body politic. It's okay to disagree on policy. It's okay to disagree on outcomes. It's not okay to just completely fabricate a list of supposed facts to stir people up, to agitate people, to get likes on your Facebook page. The willingness to correct something that happens through social media is a very positive message.
I asked Representative Cheney if he thought censure was enough, and he said, well, he does believe Representative Giddings committed perjury yesterday in her answers to the committee, and that should rise to the level of expulsion. He said expulsion carries a much higher bar, meaning you better have some pretty good smoking gun evidence. However, he doesn't believe the committee was comfortable with giving the same recommendation to Giddings that they gave to Von Ellinger. Their offenses weren't on the same level, he says. And that's why Representative Cheney believes the majority of the House will vote in favor of the committee's recommendation. So what does Representative Giddings think about all of this and today's unanimous decision? Well, I'm sure you can probably guess based on how she's responded up to it to this point. Let's put it this way. We were sent a written statement, and in it, she called the whole process corrupt and a political ploy put together by the Speaker of the House, who just happens to be running against her for Lieutenant Governor. In fact, in her statement, Giddings names House Speaker Scott Bedke 8 times, claiming the chairman of the Ethics Committee is handpicked by the Speaker, Bedke, and committee members are beholden to the power Bedke wields as Speaker, she went on. Today's decision makes a mockery of Idaho's ethical standards and demonstrates that we are over the target in exposing the rampant corruption of Bedke and his allies. Speaker Bedke's decision to run for Lieutenant Governor has been common knowledge since the beginning of the year, long before he trumped up these charges against me, and now he's using his office and tens of thousands of dollars, taxpayer dollars, for his own campaign purposes. But that's business as usual for Bedke, she said. And those are just 3 of the 8 Bedke name drops in here, and a couple of the third-person references to Mr. Bedke. However, Bedke's power as Speaker ends at the end of this year. Win or lose the seat for Lieutenant Governor, he'll be done as a lawmaker when this session officially ends. Timing has been brought up before, both by Giddings and by Bedke, who said this same thing 2 weeks ago when the hearing was announced. The timeline of events simply doesn't match Representative Giddings' assertion that there is some type of political smear campaign targeting her based upon the ethics investigation. Her attempt to excuse Representative Von Ellinger's conduct is why, he said, he signed on with 24 other House members to make that request on May 3rd. Representative Giddings did not declare her intention to seek a statewide office until May 21st, 2021. Representative Giddings is now attempting to deflect and use the investigation as a fundraising tactic. The bottom line is this. Representative Giddings posted on her social media page a picture, the name, and other personal details about a teenage State House staffer who was accusing a lawmaker of rape. And it was still posted during Von Ellinger's ethics hearing a week and a half later. As almost every member of the Ethics Committee made a point of saying, yesterday and today, Giddings has every right to do such a thing. But to a person, they all agreed she shouldn't do such a thing. And her failure to accept that and showing contempt rather than remorse, claiming to be a victim while going so far as to say there isn't a victim in the Von Ellinger case, is what sealed her unanimous fate with the Ethics Committee. And which is why they found Representative Giddings' conduct not only unbecoming, but detrimental.